9 attackers and more than 300 were wounded. 8 of the attacks occurred in South Mumbai at Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, Mumbai Chabad House, the Oberoi Trident, at the Taj Palace and Towers, Leopold Cafe, Kama Hospital, the Nariman House, the Metro Cinema, and in a lane behind the Times of India building and St. Xavier's College. There was also an explosion at Majagaon in Mumbai's port area and in a taxi at Ville Parle. By the early morning of 28 November, all sites except for the Taj Hotel had been secured by the Mumbai Police and Security Forces. On 29th November, India's National Security Guards NSG conducted Operation Black Tornado to flush out the remaining attackers. It culminated in the death of the last remaining attackers at the Taj Hotel and ended the attacks. Media conference with Lal Goel condemned such type of cowardly attacks and hope that no terrorist organization will ever dare to attack our country. Today, India is also celebrating Constitution Day. The Constitution Day of India, or National Law Day, also known as Samvidhan Divas, is celebrated in India on 26 November every year to commemorate the adoption of the Constitution of India. On 26 November 1949, the Constituent Assembly of India adopted the Constitution of India, and it came into effect on 26 January 1950. The Government of India declared 26 November as Constitution Day on 19th November 2015 by Gazette notification. Previously, this day was celebrated as Law Day. 26 November was chosen to spread the importance of the Constitution and to spread thoughts and ideas of Mr. Ambedkar. Media conference with Lal Goel wish you all on this day. Now coming to our main topic, that is managing family business. It is something that's really fun to do. It is a family business. In most cases, family businesses are stronger because of the complementary skills of their members. And to discuss this very, very important topic, relevant topic, especially in India, where the joint family concept is still existing, the managing family business, we have a very elite, knowledgeable, experienced panelists are with us. And I would like to invite my first panelist guest, and he is Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal is the former Professor of Marketing, Innovation and Management, IIM Lucknow, XLRI Jamshedpur, and California State University, USA. He is President of Indo-Gulf Management Association. He is US Fulbright Fellow Boston, EFMD Fellow Paris, and British Council Fellow London. In 2019, he was ranked among the 251 most fabulous global education leaders. Welcome, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal on our show. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, today's topic is managing family business, and you being a professor of marketing and innovation as well as management, you is the person who can very well explain how to manage family business smoothly, profitably. So managing family business, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goel, for giving me this honor to open this discussion today, which, as you correctly mentioned, has very, very elite speakers who are dominant figures in their chosen discipline. And I think, I thought that I would first listen to them and then probably add my own 2 cents to what they are saying at the end. But since you have already given me the start, let me just use that start by sharing certain data. And that particular data is going to tell us the importance of the context as well as the topic that we are dealing with today. The research has shown that the family businesses, they form almost 35 to 40% of the Fortune 500 companies in the world. Now, 35% to 40% is not a very, very, mean sum, and therefore it shouldn't be just dismissed as a stat. If we look at the US itself, in US, 50% or more of the US GDP, which we are talking about 16 to 17 trillion dollars, or maybe more, now that it is growing faster, that 50% of the US GDP is coming from family-owned businesses. They generate almost 60 to 70% of the employment in that particular country. Around the globe, the percentages are varying from country to country, but the number will not be very small anywhere. They will be perhaps as significant and as big as I'm talking about the US. And in terms of new job creation, the number goes up further up. In other words, that we are not just talking about 60%, we are talking about 80% of the new generation of generation employment or generation of new employment is done by family business today. Now, clearly, we are talking about a very, very large canvas around the world. If we shorten or narrow the canvas to our Asia and see that what is the situation of family business in Asia, then you will be as pleasantly surprised as probably, many of our viewers would be, that the combined market value of family business in Asia is about $5.8 trillion, $6 trillion. This particular, wealth or this particular valuation of the companies is much more than the annual GDP of this country, even for several years to come, foreseeable. So you can see that how dominant and how important topic we are talking about. So in a business like this, where families are dominant right from the formation till the perpetuity, and I would perhaps talk about perpetuity a little bit more, because I think that the business is started very well, but not necessarily carried over in the same fashion, with the same energy, with the same outcome everywhere. Just to give you one example of our own country, there are very, very mixed opinions about the family-owned businesses in certain families like Birlas, like for instance, DCM Group, Modi Group. I can keep on naming the groups one after another, where they have either declined in influence or they have declined in their financial clout, or in terms of their own impact on the society, things haven't gone that well. Of course, we do have many family-owned businesses which are growing, like for instance, the first one is Tata's, that how much they have grown from one generation to another, and how they are adding value further. And they are also following the traditions and values of the family. They haven't wavered from there. Similarly, you have also at least one segment of Birlas, which is Aditya Vikram Birla Group, which has increased the wealth, increased the value, increased the shareholders' wealth. Everyone has stood to gain from his expertise of Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla, that how he has increased. And not only they have increased this, they have also increased international alliances, global linkages they have created. So there are shining examples of family businesses in India, and there are not so shining examples. Some of the families are really, really having difficulty in terms of, staying afloat, like JK Group and many other groups that perhaps we need not mention and point out because of, paucity of time and perhaps the context being global rather than just them. So therefore, question arises that why family businesses fail when they thrive and when they really, really are passed on from one generation to another or perpetuity. Let me talk about the third part first, and then I will obviously be in the ringside seat to listen to my esteemed panel speakers, what they have to say. Perpetuity is something where the business is handed over like a, very organized marathon or some kind of relay race that we see in various sporting events, that how they give the baton from one to another and how do they carry it further. I see the same thing, but in perpetuity. What happens? It happens when the people who are to take the baton from you are not chosen very, very carefully, or they are chosen carefully, but emotions overwhelm the logic, Emotions overwhelm the gender preferences, or emotions overwhelm the this cultural thing that my son or someone in the family should continue the business further. Usually, we have two or three kind of models for perpetuity. Model number one is that where gender is preferred, like male member, eldest member of the family, he takes over. And then if there are two, then in the same line of succession they are put, like in the case of Ambani's, that where Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani, who created a business from almost nothing in 1973 $2 billion business when he suddenly passed away without a will or without some kind of succession plan in place. Then after a couple of years, the family feud started. And that family feud led to many, I would say, unintended consequences where third parties had to get involved. Lawyers were getting involved, bankers were getting involved. ICICI chairman at that particular time was almost like an uncle to them. And he came and he also became one of the mediators of that. The upshot of the entire thing is that it didn't go well at that particular time. And thereafter, it so happened that one brother continued the progress, the other one, for some variety of reasons, some unfortunate environmental reasons also, I would say many things happened which were not so pretty in terms of that particular brother. So now this elder brother also has to plan because he knows the consequences of not having a very proper succession plan. So as I said, the first one is the male member. The second is the eldest member of the family, never mind the gender. In other words, it could be a daughter also, it could be a son also, depending upon that. But obviously in this particular case, they also see the merit of that particular person. But usually that merit is, I would say, secondary. At this particular moment, first thing happens. So this thing happens a lot. The third is where they create an advisory council. And in that advisory council, they create either the friends of the family or experts from outside, but very close to the family. They become the part of the advisory council who help the members of the family to run it, like it happened in many cases that you and I'm sure would like to discuss at some point if we are looking into specific case studies. So succession plan is extremely important as far as we are concerned in terms of family business. Of course, there are many other ways also. The same thing could be seen, but still there are issues, and those issues can be very much problematic and also useful. So this is the only thing I would like to highlight before I yield my place to my fellow members. That succession plan, the perpetuity plan, at the same time, the vision and values of the house, maintenance of them, but with a dynamic approach. These are the important things for any family business. One thing which I would like to end on is a positive of optimism. And that positive optimism that in general, family businesses are continuing to do well. The tradition is continuing, and absolutely they are growing the wealth, shareholders' wealth, social impact in much bigger way than probably their predecessors or parents or grandparents or other family members they had done. A very good example, as I said, is of Tata's in this particular thing. So with this kind of thing, I would like to end my initial remarks, but I will come back later on when all other speakers have also had the same. Thank you, Mr. Goel, for allowing me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, for giving your initial remarks about how to manage and how to see that the family business can grow. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he's Mr. Roger Wang. Mr. Wang is the president of Marketing Institute of Singapore. Mr. Roger Wang is the managing director and founder of Essential Works Private Limited. With more than 25 years of industry experience, he is the CEO and founder of the Marketing Institute of Singapore Academy, MISA. As a serial entrepreneur, he also founded C-Care Group, currently with 36 subsidiaries, and the Global Chinese Marketing Federation, GCMF. Mr. Roger Wang is also an active member of the Asia Marketing Federation, AMF. He has been invited as a speaker to many industry events such as the International Research E-Commerce Webinar and World Marketing Forum 2021. He is also the current president of the National Body of Sales and Marketing in the region, the Marketing Institute of Singapore, MIS, and its training arm, the Marketing Institute of Singapore Business School, MISBS. Welcome, Mr. Roger Wang on our show. Mr. Wang, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal has said. Now, we would like to definitely know your views on the managing family business. Mr. Roger Wang, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goel, for the very detailed introduction of me. But first and foremost, let me put one fact right. I'm actually the marketing consultant for the group of C-Care, which comprises of 35 companies and subsidiaries. And I'm also the director, one of the directors that is actually under the C-Care UK Hospitality Suites, which are actually currently managing 8 hotels in London and UK. Okay, nevertheless, let's come back to today's topic. Mr. Goel, first and foremost, very good morning in Dubai and very good afternoon from Singapore itself. And of course, Professor Mohan, met you last week in Dubai, and it was certainly an eye-opener. Now, let me give a word of condolence to all the victims of the Black Friday that falls into the attack of the I would say the terrorists, and of course to congratulate all of you all in India for celebrating your Constitution Day. Now, Black Friday in Singapore is a very different meaning. Just to share with you, just a bit of teaser. Black Friday in Singapore is actually a shopping haven day where you see a lot of discount being given. Now, back to our topic on family enterprise. In fact, out of all of our panels over here, I think I'm the least qualified in terms of talking about family business or family enterprise, because I don't take on any enterprise from my dad, or I don't have anyone to pass on right now as for now. But however, I do have a lot of friends that has actually taken on as the second generation in the area of family business. They're all around my era of friends. So I'll be able to share with you some of the experience that over the years that I've heard from them. I think what Professor Mohan has actually mentioned is really right. You know, it's about the succession plan that was being put forward by the previous generation itself. There is a very famous Chinese saying, 富不过三代. Now, what does it mean? It meant wealth will not supersede or surpass the third generations. And this is something that all Chinese knows about that. Now, why is this so? I think previously, some of the main Chinese enterprise itself, the founder are the one that actually possess the entrepreneur spirit. But however, that spirit seems to trickle down and seems to diminish over the generations. So this is something that what Professor Mohan has actually mentioned. The succession plan that was put in place, or that will be put in place, to ensure that the second generation, or subsequently the third generation itself, is able to actually bring the association, or sorry, the organization forth, or even expansion. So this is something that, you know, in Singapore, in fact, it is very unique because we have 4 ethnic race in Singapore itself, mainly Chinese, comprising of probably 70% Indians and Malay and others. So in Singapore, it's really I would say, a melting pot for all business from all regions. Okay, so it's here in Singapore itself is where we actually experience the different kind of family values that actually trickle down to the second generation. Now, I've known of many of my friends who are who are actually the second generation or even the third generation owner of the business or family business itself. They somehow or rather, they fail to actually recognize or fail to realize that, you know, during the initial founding stage of the enterprise itself, the kind of spirit that were being possessed by the founder of their organizations, and which is of course their patrais or the matrais of the family group itself. So this spirit itself somehow or rather it didn't really transcend on to the next generation. So that's something that I think, in terms of entrepreneur spirit itself, yes, while some of them are really qualified in academic ways, but in terms of the practitioner ways itself, somehow or other they actually have a very different view from the founder itself. So this is where I think the value of the organizations must be communicated properly through the generations. Okay. Now, family business, in fact, there are small corporations in Singapore and large corporations. There are certain difference between how a small corporations within the family business or even the large corporations and how they view family business. The small corporations, usually, the objective is really to keep all the family members around, and at the same time, to ensure the continuability and the sustainability of their livelihood. All right. And at the same time, of course, the founders will be very proud in terms of the enterprise or the business that they founded, and hoping that this will actually be carried on by the second or the third generation. So this mainly would be the objective of the founder or the first generation or some of the small, medium enterprise, or I would say even the small little stores, the hawker stores, or some of the founders itself. So on the other hand, there are large family organizations like BreadTalk in Singapore itself, which the founder has actually successfully handed over the baton to his son. So these are actually due to very careful planning from a very initial stage when the second generation is really at its infancy, followed by teens and followed by youth itself, how the various trainings actually equip them with the necessary skills, the necessary management skills that perhaps in the first generation itself, it's not that critical or crucial while the business are growing. All right, I think the first generation really focus a lot on entrepreneurship, but the second generation itself is more on the managementship. Right, so this is where the scalability of the business actually comes into play, and the challenge is really about scaling the business, and to prove to the first generation or the previous generations itself that the subsequent generations do have the means or the ways to actually bring the business to another level. Now, this is where there are a lot of conflicts between the second generations, the third generations, and the first generations. Okay, the first generations will always expect the second generations or third generations to possess the same kind of passion, the same kind of fighting spirit that they have while they were actually founding the business. But however, on the second and third generation itself, having been through or having seen the first generation on how tough on building the business itself, they probably have their own ways on thinking. And of course, in today's age, in today's digital marketing age itself, the first and second generations, sometimes they do have certain ways of conflict in how to actually employ or deploy the latest technology in assisting the second or third generations business to grow. So to them, some of them still actually holds back to some of the very old concept of relationship. All right, and a lot of first generation business are actually built on relationship that was actually built throughout the years and subsequently to sustain the business. But however, the second and generation business in Singapore or even in China or even in the region itself actually has a mind of their own. All right, they actually deploy on what it's latest, using the latest technology, which sometimes has yet to be proven, but yet they find that this is a better means or better vehicles in bringing the business forth. So the conflict actually arises there, I would say that the fault doesn't just lie on the second or third generations. Sometimes you really have to look into the first generation itself. So this is where I think Dr. Roger Lau, which is a very established professors from the Singapore Management Universities, we're going to share with you on some of the tradition, some of the probably the conflicts that actually happens between them. For me, I think the education or educating the generations on family business itself, it should not just fall on the second or third generations. I think the very first generation itself will have to recognize that when and where they should pass on the baton, all right? And the time is really of the essence itself. And some of them actually realize it a bit too late towards the end of their own life cycle. And by then itself, they find that the second or third generations are not prepared to take on the baton. So I think that it has to be on both ends itself. It's not just on one end, the second or third generations, but in fact to also educate the first generation on how to actually groom and at the same time prepared your second or third generations itself on taking on the business itself. And this, to me, the onus actually falls on the first generation. So this is where I think trainings or through talks like that, perhaps, we'll be able to pick up for the first generation on some of the tips and the hints that they can actually pass on, or they should actually exercise for the second or third generations. Now, to me, the passing on of entrepreneurial spirit from first to second generation is very interesting. First generation actually went through the whole path of business building, and second or third generations actually on scalability of the business itself. It actually requires a very, very different skill set. First generation, a lot to do with relationship management, like what I've earlier mentioned, and of course, the fighting spirit on maintaining the sustaining on the business itself. And this is where they really, the passion is really there in ensuring the survival of the business itself. When it comes to the second or third generation, a lot actually befalls on them in terms of scaling up the scalability of the business itself. The first generation would expect them to do better than the first or the second generation. So this is where pressure actually plays on the second and third generation itself. Now, however, if you do not actually look into succession plan at a very early stage, then you're doomed for failures. So there are companies that that actually hired external management staff or external top management to actually come in to help to manage the family enterprise. Now, is it a good thing or it is not? I think it's a double-edged sword. Now, first and foremost, when you hire external management itself, the very values of the family enterprise may not be able to translate to the top management. And the top management probably will have a mind of their own. And besides, the turnover of the top management itself has also got to do with, has got a very high stake in terms of the survival or the scalability of the business itself. And this is where when the second generation finds that, there are external source or external help that comes into the business in helping them to grow the business itself. It is also the mindset of the second or third generation to actually appreciate the plans on what the first generation did, on finding that perhaps there is a gap that needs to be breached. So a lot to do with communication. In fact, to me, most of the times that I hear from my peers, which are all the second generations business owner or third generation business owner, is that the first generation actually refused to let go. All right. So this is where I think, the first generation itself will actually really need to time the succession plan carefully. And it, like what Professor said, it must be a formal plan. It cannot be something that is very makeshift. All right. So formal planning will have to be done. I think the earlier the better, into the life cycle of your second or third generation business owner that you actually intend to actually hand it over. So of course, there are many ways in terms of training. Part of it, management, entrepreneurial, including finance. I think a lot of pressure will be falls on the second and third generation. And of course, the pressure is really about the scaling of the business itself. Now, imagine you have taken over your family business, and yet, if you're unable to actually scale up the business and the business went worse, I think you are in for a lot of pressure. And this is where the second and third generations itself really sometimes face the kind of pressure. But with their academic qualifications, sometimes they find that, hey, you know what, it's better for me to actually find work elsewhere. So a lot of business, like what we said, especially from the Chinese business itself, like what I said, wealth will not exceed the third generation. And most of the time, I think this happens. Now, this is where I think Dr. Roger Lal, which will be sharing with us on some of the antidotes that, perhaps the second and third generation itself can take on to actually scale up the business. Okay, so hopefully with that itself, I think more importantly, like what I've mentioned, the timing of when you want to pass on the baton to the second and third generation, understanding the second and third generation, the onus doesn't just falls on the second and third generation, in fact, pretty much on the first generation itself. And of course, the pressure that are being faced on the shoulders of the second and third generation. Last but not least, I think the main thing is trust. Trusting them, giving them the full support itself, that the second and third generation do have the means and the entrepreneurial spirit to scale up the business to another level. So with that, I would like to hand back the conference to Mr. Goel. Mr. Goel, thanks for your invitation. Certainly very happy to see you. And I wish everyone in India a happy Constitution Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rojabang, for giving your very, very enlightening views. And what Mr. Wang has mentioned about the planning and the timing of the succession plan, when the succession plan is to be timed, when they should pass on the baton to the second or the third generation by the first generation entrepreneur. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Dr. Christopher Abraham. Dr. Christopher Abraham is MSW, MBA, DLL, PhD, is the CEO and head of SP Jain School of Global Management, Dubai. He is certified design thinker from IDEO, Stanford Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, FCIM, UK. He is having 34 years experience in management, consulting, marketing, and management education in India, Singapore, and UAE. He is the visiting professor at leading universities in Australia, USA, Canada, Singapore, and UK. Earlier, he headed the executive MBA program of XLRI Jamshedpur in Dubai. He is also a 3X, TEDx, and international keynote speaker. Welcome, Dr. Christopher Abraham on our show. Dr. Christopher Abraham, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal as well as what Mr. Roger Wang has mentioned. And though both have given about the viability of the family business, how Professor Mohanlal Agarwal mentioned how the family business planned so that it can be profitable. And Mr. Roger Wang has given how the timing of passing of the baton to the second and third entrepreneur. Now, we would like to know your views on managing family business. Dr. Christopher Abraham, please.
Can I just say one more thing here, sir, if you don't mind?
Yes, please.
I also want to congratulate, Dr. Christopher, my wonderful friend, that just this week, he has been awarded one more prestigious award in Italy, which is in Florence city. And if I'm correctly pronouncing it, it is called Knight of Parte Guelfa, right? Is that correct, Chris?
Guelfa, yeah.
Yeah, Guelfa in Italy, and which is a kind of recognition for his contribution and connection between humanity, nature, and our planet. He has amassed number of awards and continuously he does so with his continuous learning, continuous teaching, continuous sharing. So I'm really, really proud to be a friend of Dr. Chris Abraham. Dr. Chris, sorry.
Congratulations,
you,
Dr. Chris, for getting this award.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Now your views on the managing family business.
Sure.
Yes,
thank you so much, Mr. Lal and Dr. Mohan Agarwal for inviting me to this very, very important discussion and extremely exciting ideas from Professor Agarwal, one of the top marketing professors in the world, and Mr. Roger Wang, who brought in some very interesting perspectives. I want to go back to the original story that Mr. Goel started with. He reminded all of us about how 26/11 is actually a Black Friday for us in a different way. And that happens to be the terror attack that happened in different places. He graphically illustrated it. But I want to focus on one particular company and then hone in on the lessons learned from that. That company in mind is one of India's most respected, in fact, I would say among the world's most respected business groups, the Tata Group. It is probably an epitome of how family managed businesses should run, right? So on that day, on 26/11, in fact, there's a Harvard Business School case study, which I normally discuss in my classes in leadership, human resources management, and organizational behavior, is an almost unbelievable behavioral performance of the employees. So let me illustrate that and then come back to the lessons learned from the context of family businesses. Now, the employees, and there were thousands of them. It's a very huge hotel, the Taj Hotel. It's the pride of India, pride of the Tata Group as well. And there were lots of international guests who were staying. On that day, the transition between the then chairman or CEO of Unilever was happening to the next one was Paul Polman. There were mega events happening. There were multi-country delegations that were having their parties there, and terrorists went helter-skelter. They were going around on a shooting spree. You can watch this. There are some, very disturbing videos on YouTube. You can watch that. But my message is something much more profound and much more uplifting. It is the behavior of the hundreds of employees who put their lives in the line of fire. Okay, so they virtually put themselves as guards. They safeguarded the interests of the employees, the customers. And here is the best part. There were employees, their natural human instinct is to run away. That's the survival instinct of every human being. But in this case, the employees demonstrated valor and courage beyond imagination. And some of them lost their lives. In fact, there's a very interesting comparison, which I'd also like to bring in, between what happened at the Oberoi Hotel and what happened at the Tata Hotel. Tata is almost 5 to 6 times larger than Oberoi, but the number of customers who died or the guests who died in Tata were less in comparison to the number of employees who died in Taj. While the number of guests in Oberoi, which was much more smaller, were larger than the number of employees who died. So what really happened? These employees, there was nothing in their employee manuals. There was nothing in their training that told them that they have to give their lives or they have to safeguard themselves, right? They just took it upon themselves to do it. Now that brings us to a unique dimension. So what made that possible? Harvard is still trying to grapple with the answers. The answer, I think, lies in the culture of the organization. And please remember, this is a 150-year-old organization. One of the key things that they brought in when the original owners, the family of Sir Jamshedji Tata, Nauroji Tata started, was the concept of stewardship. Stewardship. Stewardship is another powerful word for ownership. Who owns it? Everybody. So in other words, we bring in the concept of stakeholder centricity. Stakeholder centricity. Now, Professor Agarwal, when he started, talked about the very interesting, exciting statistics of the top companies, the world's largest companies like Walmart. They are family-owned businesses, right? And they have survived the test of time. But I think the key lesson that we learned from the 26/11 Taj terror attacks is the stakeholder centricity. Now, what is stakeholder centricity? I have a very simple acronym for it. The acronym is SPICE, S-P-I-C-E. So stakeholder centricity is a company's focus towards society, towards its partners, that is suppliers and distributors, towards its investors, that's the I, towards its customers, and towards its employees. And Taj is a classic example of what they did when they focused on this. So when we run a family business, small or big, it's not about petty, relationships or emotional challenges. It's about stakeholder centricity. What is our value? Value-driven organization. So I think family businesses are not just businesses. They're not just families, but I think they add value. So stakeholder centricity, along with value addition, should be a key component in family businesses. How do we do that? So that's $1 million or $1 billion question, depending on the size of the company. How do we do that? I think there are some principles which have stood the test of time. Number one is communication, open communication, being transparent, being open, and being communicative could be one of the simplest things that we could do. So rather than plan things behind, closed doors without the knowledge of the key players in the business, could be detrimental to long-term growth, long-term survival, long-term thriving. So open communication, transparent communication could be one key. The second one is community, building a community of people who take ownership. Communities, right? So communication, community, building a sense of collaboration. Now, here's the good thing. We have been unfortunately misled by, I would say, misdirected research that competition is the name of the game. Today, there is tremendous amount of cutting-edge research, and my fellow professors know this, that collaboration is what has helped humanity thrive. Collaboration, right? In fact, last year, there was a fascinating book by Dutch historian Rutger Bregman called, very simply titled, it's become a worldwide bestseller, called Humankind. And he validates that the entire history of humanity and humanity's success has been because of the power to collaborate, to cooperate, to be kind and compassionate. These sound like buzzwords, but the reality is that that is the truth. And as business professionals, as business professors, for us, all these buzzwords have to translate into bottom line profits. So here's the good news. So up to 2019, that is just before the pandemic, there was some very interesting research done on 4 parameters. One was Standard and Poor. So many of the companies on the S&P index, as we call it, or the top performing index, is one level. So they perform well, no doubt. Then you had on top of it, Professor Jim Collins' research on good to great companies. So good to great companies actually outperform Standard and Poor. Then above that, they looked at another set of companies, which they labeled as ethical companies, which is also fine, ethical, value-driven companies. But guess what? The top performing companies in a worldwide research across corporations, most of them family managed businesses, is stakeholder centric organizations. In other words, to validate, stakeholder centricity outperforms ethical companies, good to great companies, and at the bottom of the rung, Standard and Poor. They all perform, but right on top of the totem pole are stakeholder centric companies. So I think a big lesson that we can take from family managed business, the longevity, the succession plans that were so beautifully articulated by my fellow panelists, I think is the power of stakeholder centricity. What value can we give? And this is today becoming an increasingly relevant proposition. Purpose-driven organizations, right? Most of us know this, again, from the research and motivation science. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So can we create a sense of purpose for our stakeholders, for our employees, for our customers? Can we provide value? Can we do it constantly communicating it in a transparent fashion? Can we create the sense of community? Can we provide collaborative opportunities across stakeholders? These things on the long run would help. A very recent instance was Mr. Harsh Mariwala, who runs Marico, one of India's top FMCG companies. Very interesting model. He again runs it based on principles of trust and transparency. And he articulated it very recently, a couple of months back, on a very interesting article where he says, the business of family business is to let professionals run it. Of course, Mr. Roger Wang made a word of advice that getting external people, we need to be extremely careful because they also need to sink in with the values of the institution. But having said that, if we could get that right and have the right kind of systems in place, then we are building the right kind of community, the right kind of stakeholders with communication, collaboration, and cooperation. And the last one is corporate governance. Now, in this world of transparency, today, whatever you do would be known, if not today, tomorrow, if not tomorrow, day after tomorrow. We are seeing the kind of crazy cases going across. Theranos, some of us must be tracking the story of Elizabeth Holmes, who was then toasted as the Steve Jobs of biotechnology. But today she is languishing between the judicial process because what she ran was a sham operation, right? So from being open in communication, from creating communities, from having collaborative endeavors through stakeholder centricity, we also create systems of corporate governance which can ensure the longevity, because it's all about, at the end of the day, let's be clear, it's all about ethics and values and stakeholder centricity. So these would be my thoughts, and thank you once again for the opportunity given. I think the world would definitely be a better place if all family managed businesses follow these principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chris Abraham, for giving your views. And when he started, he mentioned about the Taj Hotel. I still remember the sacrifice of the then general manager of the Taj Hotel, Mr. Karamveer Singh Kang.
Absolutely.
And he lost his wife and 2 sons, but he has not left the hotel till the last. And he was all there. And so it is because he was inculcate the professionalism, the ownership by the Taj Group or the management. And that is why the family business, if they can inculcate such type of feelings in their employees, then the family business can do wonders. Thank you very much, Dr. Abraham, for giving your views. Now, I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Dr. Roger Low. Dr. Roger is the adjunct faculty, Singapore Management University, Singapore. Dr. Roger Low spent more than 20 years working for various family businesses in senior management roles. He is currently a consultant to family businesses in Asia and an adjunct faculty at the Singapore Management University, where he teaches courses in family businesses and organizational behavior. He is concurrently the second vice president of the Marketing Institute of Singapore. Prior to this, he was an executive vice president at the European Private Bank, as well as the founding executive director of the Family Business Network, Pacific Asia. Dr. Low holds a doctorate in business administration from the University of South Australia and has carried out research in the organizational dynamics of family businesses. Welcome, Dr. Roger Low, on our show. Dr. Low, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, what Mr. Roger Wang, as well as Dr. Chris Abraham has mentioned. Now, you being a, you yourself is basically teaching the family business management. And so your experience updated, because your field is the family businesses. Definitely, we would like to know your views on managing family business. Dr. Roger Low, please.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Goel, for inviting me to this forum, and of course, thank you, Mr. Mohan, for giving me, Professor Mohan, for giving me this opportunity. Now, a family business is a synthesis of three systems: the family system, the business system, and the ownership system. Now, it's a delicate balance among these three systems, which is very much like a three-legged stool. A family business is like a three-legged stool, right? The family business owner is doing a perpetual balancing act of being an owner, of being a shareholder, a leader, a father, a brother, etc., etc. Now, balanced well, the family business is well poised for enduring success. If not balanced well, it is a shaky three-legged stool, and it's very likely to topple over and hurt the business family. Now, I would like to offer some tips, perhaps, or suggestion on how to manage family businesses better. In all, I have been involved in, or rather with family businesses for almost 40 years. About 20 years as a non-family manager in various family businesses, from junior executive roles all the way up to CEO, the CEO position. I've been involved in advising family businesses all over Asia when I was with the bank, as well as I was in, I'm in private practice as a business, family business advisor. So what I'm going to say is distilled from my many years of working in and advising and observing family businesses. I've seen family businesses succeed, tremendous success. I've seen miserable failures in family businesses. So I'm going to share some of my observations and suggestions for managing family business better. Now, first, I think family businesses should curb excessive nepotism. I want to qualify this phrase. I said curb excessive nepotism. I did not say curb nepotism. Because business families have this, what I call dynastic crave, right? Which is an inclination to bring in family members into the family business. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. The family takes care, as a family, you take care of each other. And family members also have a stake in the business. They act as stewards rather than agents, and they could be highly motivated. However, only competent family members to be brought into the family business. Incompetent family members, especially those holding senior management positions in the business, could cause irreparable harm and bring about the downfall of the family business. Family members who join the family business must not only be competent, they must also be passionate about the business. They should not join out of obligation to the family or to keep or to seek a safe and easy career. Now, next, I think you should, as some of the previous speakers have said, you should bring in non-family professional managers. There are only so many competent family members you can bring into the family business, especially in highly technical positions. I've seen wives who are brought in as finance director who does not know the difference between credit and debit. Now, family business need to bring in professionally qualified and experienced non-family managers to augment the talent pool in the family. Once employed, right, do not have different strokes for different folks, right, and treat family members more favorably than non-family employees. Non-family employees should be treated fairly and equally. And also, we need to respect their professional expertise and get them involved in important decision-making rather than leave such important decision-making to the inner circle of family members who make the decision during the family dinner. You should also need to develop a clear career progression path for your non-family managers. And another thing is to take a long-term view. Right? And this especially will not happen in subsequent generation, unlike the founder's generation, who tend to take a longer term view. All right. So we do not go solely for short-term returns, or rather short-term returns, and manage or even manipulate quarterly results like some non-family businesses. All right. Some investment takes a longer time to bear enduring returns. The business belongs to your family. Do not think of just the current generation. Think of the next generation and beyond. It's supposed to be passed down from generation to generation. That's why it's called family business. Then, like many of you have mentioned, right, it is very important to have a clear succession plan. Much as he or she wishes, the current CEO may not live forever. Life is uncertain. We could pass on or be incapacitated due to various reasons, such as illness, accidents. Nowadays for COVID, anytime you can get it. All right. So as such, enduring family businesses must have a pipeline of talent ready to take over at short notice. Consequently, a succession plan must be in place. Potential successors must be assessed and identified early and developed for leadership positions. Remember, succession, I always say this, succession is a process, it's not an event. Succession must be planned, right? As they say, not planning will have serious consequences, right? The top job should be given to the most competent and willing person, regardless of gender, regardless of birth order, regardless of family ties. I've seen many succession problems, right? I have sons and nephews coming to me as a family advisors telling me that they do not want to work with the old man. The old man came to me and said, I am at a loss. The next generation does not want to take over. But when I talk to the next generation, they say, yes, we are very interested in the family business, but we do not want to work with him. You see the problem there? So another thing is that family businesses, and particularly family business, I just explain later why. Like family business must accept change, right? As we all know, we live in a VUCA world, a world which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Today's business environment is constantly changing and unstable. The environment is difficult to anticipate or predict, and it's more complex than ever, and it's also multi-layer, right? Things are not completely clear or precisely determinable. Family businesses, like all good organizations, must be prepared to live in such an environment. Family businesses must continue to innovate and respond to this ever-changing environment so as not to be overtaken by the changing environment. Now, why is this particularly relevant for family businesses? You know, one critical challenge for family businesses is their respect for tradition. And secondly, also inbreeding. You know, family businesses that have been handed down from generation to generation, they are very proud of their legacy, they respect their tradition. But tradition can cut both ways, you know. You respect the tradition too much, you get tied to it, and you cannot change, and you cannot see the changing environment. And even if you want to change, it's difficult because tradition tries to pull you back. And another thing is inbreeding. The founder may have founded the business, and worked in that particular business until the day he passed on. The subsequent generation joined the family business immediately after school. The family business is the only organization they know and the only organization they have worked in. They only see one organization. This is inbreeding. And this is not good. This is detrimental. Right? Because what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. Right? Attempting to run the family business in the way you did in 1995, right? Or 2005, or even 2015 is probably a recipe for trouble, right? Because yesterday's success cannot be extrapolated to become tomorrow's success. So family businesses must continue, notwithstanding the respect for tradition and inbreeding, they must continue to look outward, anticipate and respond to the changing and challenging environment. I would strongly recommend that family businesses promote learning to stimulate thinking and fresh strategic insights. And of course, right, solicit ample input from outsiders to keep things in perspective. And then manage conflicts. Right? When people work together, especially family members working together, conflicts are inevitable. A family business is a confluence of two diametrically opposite systems. The family system, which is emotion-based on one hand, and the business system, which is task-oriented on the other. Now, when these two very different systems come together or overlap, as in a typical family business, conflict is inevitable. Domestic issues get carried over into the business, and the conflicts in the business is a manifestation of domestic unease. Now, all these conflicts should be resolved amicably. If not, the conflicts can be destructive and can cause enormous harm to the family business. To manage conflicts, communication and trust are essential. Work hard to build good relationships and find constructive ways to resolve conflicts. Compromise if you must, right? And also have relationship maintenance activities occasionally. Not everything is about work. Family business owners have big egos. And therefore, one thing they must always bear in mind is to have a clear boundary between personal interest and family business interest, right? Founders being entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs have super egos. And maybe that's what makes them successful, right? But while it's true that the business family and its leader must have devotion and commitment to the family business, and this requires their time, their energy, and also nurturing, they must be aware that there's a clear distinction between their personal interest and the business interest. They should not look at the family business as an extension of themselves and begin to mix the business needs and the expenditures with ones which are for their own personal ego or ego-driven needs. Using company funds to fund the family holiday is a clear example of this. Another sign that they have crossed this line is when constructive criticism about the family business, especially from non-family employees or independent board members, is taken personally. Now, this behavior will cut off future insights and valuable constructive contributions. I almost fell off my chair, when I was sitting in a family business meeting as an advisor, when the family CEO said, in response to one non-family manager's comment, and he said, "This is a stupid idea. Only stupid people have such stupid idea." Now, do you think his non-family managers in future will want to say anything? This behavior will cut off future insights and valuable constructive contribution because the big ego was hit. And I think some of you have already mentioned, the other thing I want to say is that you must have a proper family governance system. Now, as the family business grows and with more family members being involved in the family business, the development of the family governance systems becomes necessary, right? The family business to set up a family assembly, which is a gathering of shareholding families, right? A family council, this is a subset of the family assembly, and also develop a family constitution. Right? The family assembly and the family council may empower shareholders and family members to give voice to issues and concerns. And they also provide a reliable forum for delivering information about the state of the business and offer a safe haven to teach family members the rights and responsibilities of ownership. The family constitution or family charter, on the other hand, makes explicit some of the principles and guidelines the family members and shareholders will follow in their relationship with each other, with other family members and company managers. It lays out explicitly what is allowed and disallowed. And then also have an independent and effective board. There must also be this effective board of directors comprising outside and independent directors who can provide value-added advice and counsel to family members on the board. You know, in most family businesses, the whole board consists of all family members. That is not ideal, right? We should have external directors who may or may not be from the same industry, but they must be prepared to tell truth to power and assist in good policy making. Having family friends or golf buddies who are there to earn a director fee is not the right way to do things. Right, okay, with the time available, I have given my take on managing family businesses better. I hope that these family businesses can achieve harmony in the family, prosperity for the owners, and happiness for people working in the family business. And the family businesses can be sustained from generation to generation. Right, I wish all family businesses an outcome of warm hearts and deep pockets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roger Lowe, for giving your very enlightening details about the management of the family business. I'm sure those business people who are watching our show today will definitely get a very fair idea and knowledge how to manage successfully a family business. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to ask my first question to Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, you have mentioned, and our speakers also mentioned about the Tata's group. And the speakers have also mentioned that once the outsider comes in the family business, what happens? And we have seen two famous cases in India. One is the Ratan Tata versus Cyrus Mistry, and the other one is Infosys case, Mr. Narayan Murthy versus Vishal Sikka.
Yes.
Now, in both the cases, which are supposed to be the ones very well managed companies, very respected companies, it has taken a very ugly turn. And the ugliest turn is that even now the allegations are the CGI, the then CGI, because he was the class fellow of one of the leading solicitor of India. Through him, that case has been hushed up against against the Mr. Mistry. Otherwise, it would have gone in the favor of him, not in the favor of Mr. Tata. That is another story. Now, my question to you is the family business means that you will be like a dictator as a family, whether you have knowledge or not, and you will not allow the professionals to work independently? If they are allowed to work independently, definitely they may take some chances. They may want to do something new, which may not liked by the business, those family people. Do you think that is the case? That's why the big corporates, even like Mr. Mukesh Ambani, is not like giving any importance to those professionals who are working there. Otherwise, like a position of CEO, which Cyrus Mistry and Mr. Vishal Sikka, they failed. So what are your views about that, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal?
Thank you, Mr. Goel, for raising some of the most controversial but very, very relevant cases for our discussion. As far as Tata and Cyrus Mistry infight or division is concerned, it has now been documented a lot, both by the horse's mouth as well as by the observers. One of the persons who was a part of Cyrus Mistry now is teaching in Singapore. So therefore, he has also talked about his own experiences in his own way. I'm talking about Professor Nirmali Kumar. So he had done, that particular thing. As far as Sikka is concerned, I am only going by the reports of media as well as others, because I do not have any particular personal insight to validate any of that. And that is that Mr. Sikka came from a very, very different background of a large MNC to a family-owned organization. And he was keeping a lifestyle which was not even the dream of anyone in the family of Narayan Murthy in terms of his lifestyle. He was, mixing up business with pleasure. He was keeping his home in Mumbai, working in Bangalore. Many things were happening. Which
Okay, bye. Yeah, thank
Sorry,
you,
just
bye.
hold on, please.
Bye.
Just
No,
hold
that's okay. That's
one
all right.
moment. One moment.
That's
Yes,
all right.
yes, please go ahead.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
we anyway needed a female voice today, so I'm glad that we got
Yeah,
that.
please go ahead.
I was feeling from that point of view. So this was the thing, that there were perhaps fundamental differences between the vision, values, and the principles of Infosys, with which Infosys was started. And he thought that this gentleman, Mr. Sikka, will bring or extend the values of that. So that was the reason of fallout. At least that is what I know. But maybe, as I said, I'm not privy to private things that happened. And that is why when he was let go, when Sikka was let go, nobody shed a tear of anything, whether joy or not joy. He was just, kind of story which was very quickly forgotten. Nobody even will put him into the annals of the progress of Infosys at any point of time. As far as Cyrus Mistry and others was concerned, I think there was an issue, and that issue needs to be debated at some other time. That do these people let go of ownership? I think I would really like to endorse the point of Dr. Roger Lowe, in which he said that these people should also know when to give it to the people who know better. Probably in this particular case, it so happened that there was some issue of both ego as well as somewhere as somebody was reversing the decisions of the previous executive chairman, and that is Mr. Ratan Tata, with reference to certain companies and alliances and relationships which he had built, and somewhere he felt that Cyrus was not doing the things that should have been done in the Tata tradition. But what happened, as you very rightly said, was ugly. So I wouldn't put this particular thing at all, that they are unable to withstand, unable to tolerate the external professionals. I don't agree with that, because a very good example in Tata itself is Dr. Chandrasekhar of TCS, who is now, the chairman of Tata Sons, and who played a very, very big role in terms of buying of Air India in Tata Group. So I do not agree with that conclusion. But with that episode, definitely that episode was very bad, and it created a bit of a spot for everyone. Even Ratan Tata was also not spared from the ill effects of this kind of sudden and very, very brash kind of exit of Cyrus Mistry. Whether it is related to some people, these are all rumors, market rumors. We cannot go into those. But fact of the matter is that they were. As far as him is concerned, even in the case of Infosys, what we were saying, that nobody should be allowed into the family business as an obligation. It should be as an option. You have the option to join the business. If you do not want to wish, no problem. I am not alone. We have got advisory council. We have got number of board of directors, and they also help us in going where perhaps our family members cannot take us to. So therefore, this particular thing was also followed by Narayan Murthy very well. I think it was clash of the lavish lifestyle of the people we were carrying and the lifestyle that he was publicly known for and have been practicing, whether he or his wife Both were leading very, very simplistic life. One more, and then I